Dear friends, the American State Department has come out with its list of countries of particular concerns. Now, this list is about countries, which are ranked on the base of religious freedoms or rather lack of it. And this year, there are 12 countries, including Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Iran, China, and Russia. Now, the reason why we are here to discuss this is because after this list came out, the vice chair of the USCIRF, which is United States Commission for International Religious Freedoms, tweeted to the State Department that why is India not in this list? And that's why we are here to discuss this because this is something that in our previous conversations with Dr. Salvatore Babones, who is an eminent academic based in Sydney, he had indicated this in the past that that it is not just about people coming out with these lists, and it's not just about this being an academic discourse, that this could have real world repercussions with India being censured, or even dangerous things like India being put on a sanction list, potentially on a sanction list, and so on and so forth. So let's begin this conversation, and with us we have Dr. Salvatore Babones. We also have the editors of the Australia Today, Dr. Amit Sarwal and Jitarth Bharadwaj, for joining us from Melbourne. Now let's begin this discussion with Dr. Babones. Thank you so much for joining us today. Your initial thoughts on this development?
This is just more of the same. It's very, I'm sorry to laugh. It's very amusing to me because as I've been studying India for the last few years, I keep seeing the same tropes appear and reappear. And, as someone who's very attuned to anti-Semitism, I've been aware all my life of anti-Semitic tropes appearing, reappearing, and then being repackaged into new material. Well, now I'm seeing exactly the same thing with anti-Hindu and anti-India tropes. Them just being repackaged, reappearing, the same usual suspects recycling the same material, only now instead of Israel on the label, it's India on the label, and instead of Semitic, it's Hindu on the label, but it's all the same stuff. But yes, it is a problem for India that these religious liberty reports have been hijacked by anti-India political elements to attempt to paint a bad picture for India. And it doesn't end with the USCIRF report that ultimately has not yet fed into official State Department guidance, but it has fed in, for example, to the Pew Research Center's Social Hostilities Index. So I don't know if you're aware, it was recently announced that India was the worst country in the world for social hostility to religion. Now, it may surprise Indians to find that India is the most hostile place in the world to practice your religion, but that's what the Pew Research Center says. And now it doesn't say it based on an expert survey. In the past, we've talked about expert surveys. It says it based on its own analysis of data coming from where? USCIRF. So, it all just gets recycled and recycled, and the narrative grows and grows without any new material or any real skepticism being entered into the process.
Yeah. Amit, I will get you into this discussion. Your initial thoughts on this development?
I fully agree with Salvatore when he says, they're just using usual tropes. And I'll come to the usual tropes later because he has rightly pointed out that this is, targeting of one community. Initially, it used to be the Zionists, Israel nation state, and, the Jews are bad kind of thing. And now they're looking for new villains each year. And for the last, I think since 2014, not 2014, but I think since 2002, when Modi came to power in Gujarat, it has been BJP, the bad guys, Hindutva everywhere. And you have a number of left-oriented American professors who have been talking about the same tropes. But what I'm interested in is there are two reports, basically. One comes from the US State Department, right, which you mentioned, which names China, Iran, and Saudi Arabia and other countries. But the report that we are going to talk about is particularly related to one of the tweets where this particular vice chair of an organization, a commission, says, but why is India not on this list? It looks like selective targeting of India. Why aren't you doing this? Salvatore, I would like to know, what is this commission all about? Like, who are these people behind this commission? Is it a US government organization? And how much dominance this commission has over US State Department?
So no, it's not a U.S. government organization as such, but if anything, it makes the situation look even worse. That this is a nominally independent commission appointed by the government precisely to be an independent voice outside of politics is their goal, is their remit. And so USCIRF is supposed to be the neutral guardians who then advise the State Department. Now, what it looks like as a result is that these neutral academic observers are giving advice to the State Department, which the State Department is then politically repressing by not putting India on the list of states of concern for religious repression. That's what it looks like to an outside observer who really doesn't know how these things work. Now, of course, if you're in the business, quote unquote, you recognize this has all been done before, whether it's the Countering Global Hindutva conference, whether it's all the anti-Zionist conferences that go on. We see organized, mostly Islamists, and I want to use that word Islamist advisedly, not Muslim. There's no evidence that all of this is originating from actual Indian Muslims or from Indian Muslim civil society. The evidence is all this comes from international Islamism, which is funded by Saudi Arabia, Salafists, Pakistan, who are funding these organizations that then systematically attempt to hijack the missions of these otherwise independent organizations, whether it's the case of USCIRF with Religious Freedom Report or with the Global Hindutva Conference getting a dozen academic associations to endorse their conference. Well, it's the same tactic. It's go to people who don't really know what's going on, bombard them with your message or your requests, and get them to check a box in your favor in order to, quiet you down or to avoid criticism. And so this tactic is being repeated. It's been used against Israel for decades. I mean, anyone who's been watching the Israel's place in the world is very familiar with these tactics. They're now being used against India. But the USCIRF is supposed to be an independent organization with people serving on it who have no political agenda. Now, of course, once the US government sets up an independent body, everyone with a political agenda wants to get appointed to it. That's the way it works. But the perceived independence is why the Pew Research Center, which is a truly independent research center, is relying on the USCIRF report to find its evidence of attacks against religion, right? So, and ultimately this will it will eventually end up in the democracy rankings. It'll eventually end up infecting everything because of its perceived, not its actual independence, but its perceived independence. That's why it's being targeted.
Yeah.
Now, I just wanted to ask about this perceived and actual thing, right? So one of the things, and I recently read a tweet from a Jewish association which said that, Palestinian and Muslim Brotherhood and some other Islamist organization that support Hamas and others, they have been continuously running a narrative of Muslim genocide in Gaza. While if you look at the population in Gaza from 1946 to 2021 or 22, the population has been increasing, which does not, so the perceived genocide of people in Gaza does not meet the actual statistics.
Yeah, look, I apologize. Look, I apologize for interrupting, but look, genocide is a very flexible term. Obviously, everyone knows there's been no murder of the population of Gaza, but there is severe repression in Gaza, and I don't think we should wade into these issues because, the truth is there is severe repression in Gaza. Now, there are reasons for that repression. There's the terrorist threat from Gaza. There's an ongoing state of war. It's a very complex situation. Yes, we all know that genocide is not an appropriate term to apply to it, but saying that the population is increasing means that everything is all right is also, I think, disingenuous.
Just a side example to use the word genocide and how people have variously been using the word genocide. And now the word genocide has been coming up in the Indian context as well.
Yeah.
Recently, they said under Modi, there is a Muslim genocide going on, but there is no actual proof to point out repercussions, yes, both Hindu and Muslims, Christian, and everybody is facing, right? But it depends on which political party. India is a vast nation. Which political party rules and who gets on the other end of their politics, suffers mostly. And this happens all over the world. But do you think the using word genocide so loosely with India, and that too in mainstream narrative, would help both, like either side?
Look,
Especially,
the academics who study genocide they realized many years ago that they're in possession of a very strategic word. And so the Journal of Genocide Studies has been weaponized to study all sorts of situations that aren't in a literal sense genocide. And of course, they've expanded the term by using the word cultural genocide, quote unquote, equating it with the Holocaust, which I think is a, it's a very sad, despicable strategy to leverage the Holocaust for your own political gain is a terrible thing to do. Unfortunately, many academics have done just that. Now, I'm no expert on genocide, but clearly alleged, and I'm going to be clear, alleged suppression of culture. I have little reason to believe that actual suppression of culture has gone on, whether in Gaza or in India, but alleged suppression of culture is then translated into cultural genocide, which is then shortened to genocide. And the real victim here is the actual genocides. The real victims here are, the Holocaust survivors, the Armenian genocide survivors, the Rwandan genocide survivors, people who actually did go through actual genocides. Now, we all know nothing like that's happening in India. Nothing like that's happening in Gaza. Let's let the word be.
Yeah. Jay, let me get you into this discussion. Now, obviously, while this is a domestic American commission, but still, what kind of impact do you think this has on diplomacy in terms of India's engagement with America and things like that? And what do you think could be the motives behind, these kind of which seems like vested interests acting, on some agenda. That's what it seems like. What are your initial observations, Jay?
Pallavi, it's a very frank thing, as Salvatore has just said, that USCIRF in itself is an independent body. My understanding is they will not do something which purposely to defame India or defame the government of the time right now. They will not do it purposely. So why this kind of report has come in? So I have been working on this funnel of information which flows towards US or Western institution for quite a long time, a few years now. And I can tell you, USCIRF works with a number of players in US who, if Salvatore want to call them Islamists, or Amit want to call them some other influences of Western world, or who are connected with India's enemy, may it be Pakistan, may it be Middle Eastern cabal of people, may it be Chinese cabal. I don't want to get into this. But there is a well-greased funnel which produces information or documentation in India. It works on the ground, then it supplies that through other NGOs which are spread over Europe, America, and even in Australia. And then there are 4 or 5 players there in America who collect and then prepare a report, and they are in partnership with USCIRF, and continuous funneling of that narrative of genocide or minorities are in danger or suppression of rights. When that continuous information flow goes in one direction, then we see a report the way it has been presented. Now, second thing, I have no doubt, whatever Salvatore is saying, I have no doubt that after a while, USCIRF vice chair, as he has written, I mean, I was not surprised at all. Abraham Cooper, what he wrote on Twitter, they are working every day with these Islamist outposts of whatever people you want to call them. They are working every day. I have documentation and documentation. They go for their lectures together. They do parliamentary debates together. They go to the parliamentary presentations together. So it's not that they are separate or these people are separate. Now, I fail to recognize who is who. Institutionally, they could be independent, but when the human resource comes, when your attributions come, then everything is so gray that it's so hard to find out who is who. That's what my understanding of it is.
Yeah.
Look, I mean,
Now,
by any chance, could I share screen for a minute? Do you have?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me just see if I can share screen here, and we'll see if this works. I think we'll. So can you see my screen on commissioners for the?
Yeah, I'll get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we look through the process, there are 9 commissioners. Here's how they're appointed. Okay, they have a leading person, the either Senate Majority Leader, Minority Leader, the House Majority Leader, House Minority Leader, or the President appoints members to the commission. Now, remember that these commissioners, this commission is not an issue in domestic U.S. politics. Nobody in America, except for special interests, cares about this report. Okay, so the way commissions like this in the U.S. work, people who are highly motivated give political donations to someone like Nancy Pelosi or Mitch McConnell. It's not a Democrat-Republican issue. It's not a left-right issue. Someone gives political donations saying, could we get our person, in exchange for this political donation, could we get our person appointed to the commission? Okay, the House Minority Leader, the House Majority Leader, sure, this is a minor ask. You're giving $10,000 to the campaign. All you want is a commissioner on a non-government body. Fantastic, no problem, right? We'll make the appointment. Now, the person who gets the appointment is not anti-India. The person who's making the appointment is, again, a political operator. But that person is bundling donations for their political candidate. And that political operator, is then appointing staff on the basis of, this so-and-so organization, Hindus Against Hate has given me $20,000, and Hindus Against Hate, which is actually a Muslim Front organization, this organization says, could you please hire so-and-so to be on your research analyst staff. And so this is how commissions like this get staffed. They're entirely political appointments. Yes, they're independent, but because they fly below the screen of politics, they're not like the Federal Reserve Commission, right? The Federal Reserve Commission, everyone is fighting and scrutinizing every member who gets on the Federal Reserve Commission. This commission is a minor commission. It doesn't matter to anyone in the U.S. Thus, those countries and those organizations that are willing to bribe their way, and it's not literally a bribe, so please don't sue me, but who are willing to pay their way into politics, get to their way. Now, this disadvantages a democratic country, so it's very difficult for India as a democratic country to play this game. Now, ultimately, Indian Americans might start playing this game. They can play it too if they want to, but Indian Americans are divided on party lines. They don't have an agreement as to how they would like to present India in the international media. But a country like Pakistan, a country like Saudi Arabia can use dark money to simply buy its way onto the commission. And that's how it works. Now, the commission will, in general, produce seemingly objective outputs. But ultimately, the only country they particularly want to target, used to be Israel, and now it's Israel and India are the countries they want to target. So it's all a pay to play. But because it has this veneer of independence, the press will report it as independent, and Pew will pick it up as independent. So the Pew Research Center has been using this USCIRF data to vilify India since its very first report on hostility towards religion. That is since 2008. So this isn't just a BJP issue. This is an India issue. India has been either the worst or the second worst country in the world for religious intolerance, according to Pew Global Attitudes Project. it has been the number one or number two country for religious intolerance ever since 2008. And
Yeah.
that's a problem for India.
Yeah, Salvatore, I want to ask you this as well, because this is an important question, that it's not this being just about some people being inimical to India. I mean, aren't these people actually, in a way, kind of, dangerous for national security interests for America as well? Because India is a strategic ally for America. India is the world's largest secular democracy. So when they are inimical to India for whatever reasons, aren't they in a way also kind of dangerous for America and American national security?
I wouldn't say for national security, for U.S. interests more broadly. I mean, the U.S. has no particular national security concern with regard to India. India is going to oppose China. Whether India buys U.S. weapons or Russian weapons, India is still going to oppose China. So it's not really a national security issue for the U.S. It is a commercial problem for the U.S. as India becomes more important for U.S. investment and U.S. trade. Of course, it becomes an issue when we start seeing protests about U.S. arms exports to India that will alarm major U.S. arms producers. That's probably, because these are very politically connected companies, probably the biggest insurance policy for India is that ultimately Boeing or Lockheed will step up and try to intervene with a lot of money because they see their opportunity to export to India being restricted. And it's sad that it comes to that, but really, what we have to communicate to people here is that you can't take these things seriously. And we have to communicate that to journalists as well. To people like the Pew Global Attitudes Project's Religious Liberty Report is written by a woman with an Indian name. I don't want to out her. You can go look it up if you want. But a woman with an Indian name who graduated from a U.S. liberal arts college. Okay. Why is she using this USCIRF data to vilify India? Well, she can use it, right? Now, why isn't she calling it out? Well, she may believe that it's objective. I mean, I don't know what she knows. It's just really, the confluence here is just really circumstantial and really incredible, right? Everywhere I look at rankings involving India, I see either Islamists, anti-Semites turned anti-Hinduists, or I see Indian heritage liberals. and I know it's terrible. I don't want to connect these two because I know it's such a big confluence in Indian internal politics, this accusation that liberals are supporting Pakistan, right? And that's not true at all. I don't want to be part of that narrative. On the other hand, I don't want to suppress facts just because they could be mobilized for a narrative with which I disagree.
Yeah.
Now,
I would like to get you in now. Why do you think that India, being the world's largest secular democracy, in your understanding from an academic point of view, what do you think would be the reasons behind either unintentional or intentional mislabeling of India like this, even when the facts are in front of everyone? I mean, India is the world's largest secular democracy.
Look, for a reason, facts do not matter to such organizations, especially, I'm a big James Bond fan, and that's why I like Salvatore too much. He has that aura. And if you look at any of the Bond villains, it's world domination, chaos. They don't want world domination. They just want chaos in the world, because chaos means business. That one of the reasons left Islamists and now Khalistanis have also jumped into this bandwagon. At the end of the day, these groups just want street credibility. It's an American expression, the street cred. They want to be feared for who they are, like the academic gangsters, right? They want a monopoly. I've seen that in India as well, particularly with left liberal academics. They want control, total control of organizations, institutions, the narrative, particularly. Otherwise, they have no other agenda. The only agenda is keep chaos. It's good for your business. Just like the gun makers in America, Russia, Israel, or any other country, you have war, your guns will sell. If it's all peace, no one will buy your gun. So people will fund these organizations only when they can create a narrative of chaos. And that's kind of really mind-boggling, because you have people like Salvatore, and you have so many other people like Anand Ranganathan in India, and so many other scholars in various countries, Israel and Africa and other places, who have been fighting based on facts, right? And this is where, apart from answering your question, I have a question for Salvatore as well, because I just want to read Indian government's response to this. And they say, we have seen the biased and inaccurate comments on India by USCIRF, and these comments reflect a severe lack of understanding of India and its constitutional framework, its plurality, and its democratic ethos. So basically, what Indian government says is, again, narrative, right? And what Salvatore, since September, when we read his paper and we interviewed him, he's saying, fight facts, fight based on facts, not narrative. You have to point out, these are the facts, right? These are the numbers. These are the things we are doing. Now, Salvatore, do you think that Indian or any other government, or maybe you can give examples from Israel, how Israel fought back USCIRF narrative? And what are the pointers for Indian government? Because now we know that Indian government is listening to you, because they have started following on your footsteps and started fighting on facts.
Look, I don't know if anyone's listening, but look, Israel didn't fight back as such. Jewish American and Jewish Australian groups fought back, on behalf of Israel. The Israeli government's attempts are simply met with disbelief by the press. I mean, ultimately, here the question is: will the press believe the narrative that someone is peddling? And no one's going to believe. No one in the Western media, and not very many in the Indian media, are going to believe a narrative coming from the Indian government. The narrative has to come from civil society. That said, government can contextualize things and provide information. And part of the problem is that India does provide this information. That is, most of the information in the U.S. report comes from India's own commission. I forget what it's called, but it's there's an official commission in India. Maybe one of you could tell me the name of it, where you can complain about examplos of religious intolerance and bring it and have it documented. Okay. So let me give you an example. And I just want to emphasize to people, this is not a, look, I'm not Indian. How many times do I have to say this? I'm not Hindu. I don't have a horse in this race. I'm not BJP. I'm not Congress. So let me give you an example from 2008, well before the BJP took power. This was the first Pew Research Center report that ranked India the second worst country in the world for religious freedom, after only Iraq as being the worst, and India was the second worst, not for social violence against religion. Okay, now this report came out in 2008 during a Congress government, and let me again just, if I can share screen here, and let me get the report up. Okay, so I hope you're seeing the report now. So this report in 2008 had an explicit section to show you how its coding worked. They used India as the example. Going to the U.S. Committee on Religious USCIRF report, they pulled out these examples of government intolerance towards religious groups. Okay, now my favorite one is down here, an incident in which a minor woman eloped with Hindu female minor eloped with a Muslim man, underage marriage, and this was used as an example of repression of religion, that she was that he was charged with kidnapping a underage girl for marrying her. I mean, when you actually get down to the data, these are often ridiculous. Again, people being arrested, 3 pastors arrested. Okay, now that sounds bad. For making derogatory remarks against Hindu gods. Well, that's illegal in India. Now, maybe it shouldn't be illegal. I mean, we as Americans make derogatory remarks about gods all the time, but you can't criticize anyone's gods in India. People were arrested for making derogatory remarks about gods. Well, against the law, they were arrested. Now, none of these reports suggest any serious violence, any serious incidents, yet these incidents have been reported as, so here again, missionaries were arrested and released on bail the next day. Now, we can agree or disagree with these individual incidents, but when an organization is going to a country of 1.4 billion people looking for the worst incidents of religious repression to feature in a report, And the worst they can come up with is people who insulted a god illegally were arrested and then released the next day. I shrug my shoulders and I say they're fishing for ways to, they're looking for ways they can say something negative. They're not making an objective assessment. And to put this in context, my mother is a very devout Christian. She supports Christian missionaries in Somalia. She told me herself that they are not allowed to actually use the word Jesus. They can carry on their relief work, helping poor people in Somalia, but if they even utter the word Jesus, they'll be deported. Yet India ranks worse than Somalia, on hostility to religion, and so it's this kind of thing that when you see it over and over and over again, you just get weary of, and you kind of say, yes, it's the usual suspects. But what we have to do is educate people who don't follow these things closely, because your average reporter for the Sydney Morning Herald doesn't know anything about this. There's an independent U.S. organization that produces a report. The Pew Research Center, the most prestigious survey research organization in the world, produces a report. Why wouldn't you trust it, right? And so unless you're educated as to, no, this is all just recycled propaganda, unfortunately, it enters into the public record and becomes the common wisdom.
Yeah. Now, just following on from there, Jay, I'll get you in as well, which is a question for all three of you. That there is this problem with how the data is presented, and obviously for people who have studied data or are into statistics, they can pretty much clearly see even prima facie what's wrong here. But there's this another problem, of you could say alleged problem, that there is a lot of picking and choosing going on as to what data you want to publish. We see this with Elon Musk releasing this information about alleged suppression of a report regarding Hunter Biden's computer. So the point is that is it reached a stage now where there is this problem of how the data is analyzed, but there's also this problem of purposely suppressing one kind of information because you want to propagate a certain narrative. So I'll come first to you, Jay, and then I'll go to Amit and Salvatore.
See, I just wanted to add only one point. Now, when we have understood how the information or data is being recycled, what is the way to dismantle it, or to have a counter fact-based report or something like that, which could certainly give us standing in front of maybe a Sydney Morning Herald's reporter or Sun's reporter in UK or any other reporter globally. So how do we get it done? That's my point. Now we have last few months we have been talking. We have understood this fact, but how to dismantle their jargons, their all recycling of the issues? How do we do that? Do we need another set of institution? Do we need another set of people who could work on these issues? How do we do it?
Yeah, Amit, I also want to come to you because the thing is that, we often use this term, or rather people often use this term left liberal. And I always, as you know, even in our private discussions, I say that no, that these are not liberals, they're pseudo liberals. That's why I classify myself as a liberal. So the point being that how do we reclaim words like liberal and progressive, and how do we challenge people who are doing this, because they seem to be in powerful positions, and anybody who challenges them is then given, is labeled. We have faced bullying and harassment online. So how do we move forward on this? And then I'll come to you, Salvatore.
I completely agree with you, Pallavi, that, when I was, studying in India, doing my master's and everything, I kind of believed in these categories as, these compartments as very strict compartments, and people cannot move. And as I've moved, to 3-4 countries, I've worked in Fiji, Canada, and lived in US and here, Australia. I kind of believe that these compartments have been selectively created to keep tell people their position, particularly by the left. So what we consider to be right may not be right conservative right, say compared to US or Canada or India kind of right. So one of the examples is if you look at BJP's manifesto, it appears to be very left socialist, right? So and if you look at the kind of actions that the so-called left has taken in India, it is very dictatorial in terms of, if you look at Bengal 30 years, Kerala 30 years, the kind of actions that they have taken, I won't call them left at any given point of time, because you see a particular narrative being branded. So I agree with Salvatore that you have to fight based on facts. You have to educate more people. You have to give room within the classroom, sociology, anthropology, literature, soft humanities classrooms as well. And you have to bring in people with scientific bent of mind, particularly from countries like India, to challenge the statistics and data. If Pew Research, we have cited Pew Research in some of our articles, particularly related to Hindus in America and Indians in America. And for example, if a journalist so I would say, we have a clear category where you have taking facts before Salvatore came on the picture and now post Salvatore. People have now started questioning very facts, because I would have just seen USCIRF, independent body, maybe their research is true, right? Unless someone comes to and educates me, no, this is the politics behind this appointments. And that's why I asked that particular question to Salvatore. Please educate us on what this body represents itself. And a very good, just as an aside, because you mentioned Pakistan, and I think Salvatore also mentioned Pakistan at one point of time. If you look at Afghanistan, Pakistan, and US, when they were working closely, and some other academics have pointed out, Pakistan origin American scholars were selectively put in certain organizations by Pakistan-sponsored government and institutions to push Pakistani agenda, particularly towards Afghanistan. And I'm not making this up. You can Google it. The last 2 years, these scholars were called out by their American counterparts. They said that during meetings, they didn't listen. They just kept pushing their agenda until the time it became frustrating and one of the parties gave up. And the usual case was that people who are pro-dialogue usually give up because they don't want to fight at any point of time. So they leave the room. They say, I'm going to vote no for this, or I'm going to abstain from voting on this. And finally, the agenda wins. So I think fighting on facts, educating, and bringing more people who have statistics and scientific bent of mind is the question. Because once you start the shouting game, it is a win situation for the other party. So that's one of the things I would like to point out.
Yeah, and Salvatore, there's a famous saying, right, that numbers don't lie. Like data doesn't lie. I mean, in that sense. So I would like to bring you in here that. Like we know about the data that Elon Musk has released recently. Now there is one thing that you have mentioned several times, that it's so-called Indian intellectuals who have been kind of part of pushing this narrative. But do you reckon that, say, people in the New York Times, the Washington Post, or academics, do you reckon that they are completely not aware of facts on the ground, that there is that it's mostly based on these people pushing this narrative? Because as one is evident, that there is this cherry picking of data as well, even when it's in front of you. And what can be really done to challenge this? Is the way forward to engage in more dialogue? Should the government of India bring out data based on statistics and provide it to these people? What can be done going forward?
Well, Pallavi, you say facts don't lie. Someone else says there are lies, damn lies, in statistics. So we can see it either way. Look, the India's problem here is different from the political battle going on in the U.S. So, for example, with the Twitter files release, not a single major U.S. television network or mainline newspaper, Washington Post, New York Times, not a single one of them has even acknowledged that the dump of data exists. And they're not acknowledging it because very consciously they're fighting a political battle in American politics. But India is not a political battle in American politics. India is so low down the priority list that people can influence perceptions of India for their own purposes with just a little bit of effort here and there. The typical New York Times, Washington Post reporter is very aware of what's going on at Twitter and very aware of US politics. That person has virtually no knowledge what's happening in India. And you say they have no knowledge of the facts on the ground. How do we know the facts on the ground? We know the facts on the ground by going to trusted, independent sources of information, whether that's Amnesty International, USCIRF, Pew Research Center, Varieties of Democracy Institute. That's how we know what the facts on the ground are. It's very meta world. I mean, I know what the experience is of a poor Muslim in India. I only know by reading these supposedly independent reports. And that's true of an editor at the New York Times or an editor at the Wall Street Journal as well. Now, when they see that all of these line up telling a single narrative, when the supposedly independent USCIRF tells you that India is the worst country in the world for religious liberty, and the State Department politically blocks reporting on that, well, it sounds like a slam dunk case. Obviously, India is terrible. It's become a fascist state, and people in the US government are protecting India. Now, that narrative is completely wrong, but I don't blame the reporter or the editor at the New York Times, the Washington Post, at ABC, NBC, CBS for falling for that narrative. Because that narrative is being presented to them. I mean, the person who is literally writing the Pew Research Center report on religious freedom in India, okay, I don't know her personal story, but she has an Indian name. She probably knows India very well. She must know that the picture she's painting, while it serves, her own view of politics in India, I assume. Again, I don't know. I'm assuming a lot just from a name. All I have is the name. It's serving, a political agenda, but she must be aware that India is not, however bad she may think India is, she must be aware that it's not as bad as being the worst country in the world for someone to have a minority religion. So if she is producing a report that says that, and the report's based on Pew's own research. Now, Pew, I want to be clear, is the world's best, hands down, survey research organization. But this is not part of their survey research. This is an expert report they're producing from their own staff. Okay. Well, if their own staff is using USCIRF data unquestioningly to support a narrative, why shouldn't? The problem is that is their staff members who are Indian, of Indian origin, have Indian names. I mean, again, I can't know where she was born. I don't know what her religion is, but a person of Indian origin is producing that report. Now, again, if I'm the New York Times, a person of Indian origin working at the world's most prestigious research organization is telling me that India has the worst religious freedom in the world. Why wouldn't the New York Times believe that?
Yeah,
that's the issue. The issue is the Indians, the Indians on one side who want to support this narrative, and the Islamists on the other side who are peddling this narrative. They're the problem. Don't blame the New York Times for simply reporting what everybody is telling them.
Yeah, Jay, I would like to get you in here because Salvatore has made this point. But as a reporter, as an academic, perhaps this is excusable, even though, a country of 1.4 billion to just go by what, 5 or 10 people are saying may sound preposterous. But say as a journalist, like if one is sent to a country to report on the ground, normally they are supposed to do their own investigation. But we have heard this, that basically when foreign journalists come to India, they are open-minded. But when they interact with the local journalists there, they are fed into a particular narrative, and then the story begins from there. So what is your take on that, being a senior journalist?
Okay, so Pallavi, I have worked in like 4 different countries other than Australia. So what happens is, if I'm supposed to be posted in UK or Tokyo or Singapore or per se in India, so what do I do? From today onwards, when I receive a letter from my boss, Amit Sarwal, I'll ask, boss, do you have any contacts in India? So what will he tell me? Oh, these are a number of people whom we have interviewed in last 1 year. So who are those people? They are the exactly same people which Salvatore is talking about, that who have appeared on TV in last 1 year, or who have written a op-ed in one of the newspapers in that country where I am from, and I will contact them. Then through those people, I will go and ask who are the reporters I should be friends with in India. If I'm in Delhi, I'll be going to the Foreign Press Club there. I'm a member of that. Okay, so who will I meet? Then again, I'll meet Rana Ayub. I'll probably meet Bakadat. I'll meet Salvatore's best friend there. My previous boss, Rajdeep Sardesai. So what will they feed us? Assume I don't know anything about India. What will they feed me? And when I'll talk to them as reporters do, as we do, I'll ask, oh, I'm going to do a story on growth of India. They'll tell me, what are you talking? There is no growth. People are dying. People are hungry. You should be doing this report. If you want contact, I'll give you contact. So what kind of report ABC journalists will be producing? Imagine that. This is the cycle which happens. And sometimes they end up talking to Pallavi Jain. She'll be telling the growth stories. Then that cycle of what aboutry comes. In a story of 900 words, there'll be one paragraph with 3 lines saying, however, India is growing by 6.9% per year. I will claim I have put all the sides, I have also talked about India is growing by the highest percentile in the world. No other country is growing by 6.9% per year GDP. So it's okay. But you know what? They are miserable people. They suppress minorities. They are castes. They are Hindutva people. Everything bad is happening. But, they are growing by 7.8%. This is how whole journalistic circle works. This is the gist of it.
Yeah, I will take final, probably concluding comments from everyone. But Salvatore, your report that came out initially, absolutely data-based, solid on facts. Do you think that's the way to go forward? That talk about facts, because that's the only way to challenge fake narratives and maybe create more awareness, as much awareness as each one of us who values truth at the end of the day can do.
Look, there's no substitute for just doing the hard work. To piggyback on what's just been said, even so sophisticated a journalist as Shekhar Gupta fell for the independent outside panel narrative. And now you can love or hate Shekhar Gupta, say what you want, but Shekhar has consistently criticized negative international rankings of Indian democracy. He republished my report on the print, the only Indian news outlet that republished my report in full. He's been very sympathetic to the message I was promoting. Yet he did a cut the clutter, saying, "Well, Salvatore's report says this, but an entirely independent ranking just came out. Cato Institute, they say the opposite. They say that in fact Indian democracy is having problems. So we can't just blame leftists. After all, Cato Institute is a right-wing think tank." Even Shekhar Gupta fell for it, not realizing that Cato Institute just got its data from the Rise of Democracy Institute, which was the very organization that I'd criticized in my report. Now, if even someone as sophisticated, as sympathetic, and someone with such a deep knowledge of India, I mean, again, you may not like him, but no one's going to say Shekhar Gupta does not have a deep knowledge of India. If even he falls for this is an independent narrative from an independent think tank, what are you going to do? Right? You can't expect an ordinary Western journalist not to fall from it. All you can do is continue to promote a factual narrative and push to get that narrative out.
Yeah. Amit, your concluding comments, because there is also this discussion that in the Indian context, this left right, liberal, conservative, it's really not workable, because Indian society is very ancient, very complex, and things like that. But just your concluding comments on everything that's happened.
So my concluding comments are that uh, one thing that Indians should be, encouraged to do is every Indian. I think I'm not just talking about Indian intellectuals, journalists, or people who have college education, but each individual Indian has the right to question any form of report that comes either from within India or outside India, especially outside India, challenge. And there should be some way that Indians should be able to contribute directly to these reports, because if they are cherry picking or selecting reports from within India which are published by vested interest, then there is no point of being independence, right? Being independent means that you are going directly to the sources, you are cross checking facts, and then producing a report that can make or break a country's reputation. So this is not just US Commission's report that will, as Salvatore pointed out, that it has no impact on US politics, the internal politics, but it has major repercussions for India on global platforms, because India, these reports would be read by n number of countries and other scholars from different countries. So for example, someone reading in Africa would have the same ideas about India, and he or she doesn't know anything about India. They would read USCIRF report and they will say, oh, here we go, this country is not to be trusted entirely, especially South Korea or any other place. So one of the things is that these bodies should be transparent, who they should have, especially they should have a wide variety of people representing variety of faiths as well as variety of ideologies, right? We do not want a think tank where people are not allowed to think. So that kind of demolishes the very purpose. People should think, people should question, people should ask question, people should revise their reports. So Yusuf, if publishes a wrong report and people point out, people like Salvatore and even Shekhar Gupta or anyone else points out, or Jay Bharadwaj, they should revise their report and say, sorry, we did this wrong, we are removing this part and we are adding this, right? And there should be no political compulsions. I'm all for political ideological freedom, and therefore there should be no compulsion on any commission or any independent body to write a particular political narrative to suit a political ideology or a chaotic ideology, but they should do so with full transparency.
Yeah. Jay, your thoughts?
See, the action is required now. What Salvatore is saying and what I have understood, and probably what Amit had just said, is a utopia world where everything will be perfect. That's a kind of not possible, at least in near 50, 100 years. Maybe, I don't know, after that what happens. But if you want to fight this game, if you want to play this game, then there are rules on the table. Learn how to play it better than the opponent. And as Salvatore has already told, that if you want your people in the USCIRF, get them there. Get your reports, your information there, which could be included in these reports. And probably we'll not be doing this debate. Other side will be doing the report that USCIRF report is saying India is doing so well. So if you want to play this game and kind of win this game and put forward what you think should be there, then you have to kind of prepare your people, back up the person with most knowledge wins. So if people like Salvatore, people like Amit Sarwal can be backed up with those kind of resources to put forward reports and research in these institutions, then that's the solution. I don't see any other way of doing it other than playing by the rules which are already on the table. Pallavi.
Yeah, and my concluding remarks would be that one of the reasons why India doesn't do this is because India is a secular democracy. It works on principles and ethics in the international relations, and that's why it has got immense soft power. And also, I would say that my personal opinion would be that these reports are not just inimical to India. I think that in the long run, they are actually dangerous and inimical to the countries, where they are based. That would be my concluding thoughts, that this is not just something for India to think. This is something that even people in America who love their country, or if such reports are coming out in other countries, I think that at the end of the day, in the long run, they could potentially be harmful for those countries as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Salvatore, for joining us today, and also for always putting things so in such an articulate fashion. Thank you, Dr. Amit Sarwal, and thank you, Jitarth Bharadwaj, for the conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you.